David Ogilvy, the founder of Ogilvy and Mather and an ad man, revered as one of the industry's greatest visionaries, once said, "The only purpose of advertising is to sell something." By this time, you've found out what your prospect wants to accomplish. You've discovered their real motivation, and you know what they're willing to spend and the result that needs to occur. Now, you need something to bring back when you call on them to wrap up the business. Let's join Jason again and find out what you bring back to the prospect.
Welcome back. Today, I get to teach my favorite, the creative solution. Let me begin by asking you a question. If you've done a good, solid diagnostic, and you go back to see the prospect, and you've got a solution, what do you think your closing ratio on new business should be? Now be careful, because it's a trick question. Again, if you've done a good, solid diagnostic, and you go back to see the prospect with a solution, what should your closing ratio be? Well, the operative phrases and words there were a good, solid diagnostic, and secondarily, going back with not a campaign, not a creative idea, but with a solution. I have a niece who attends medical school studying to be a doctor. Recently, when I reviewed her several-year-long curriculum, I wasn't really surprised that they don't teach a course to doctors-to-be on how to sell the patient or on how to answer the patient's arguments, stalls, and objections. For you see, it's presumed that if the doctor does a good diagnosis and she knows how to make the pain go away, the patient is going to say yes. For example, if you have a splitting pain in your side and the doctor tells you, you've got appendicitis, we've got to get it out or you're going to die, what are you going to say? You're going to say, okay, doc. You'll be nervous, but you know the solution is going to make the pain go away. Alternatively, if you have an aching throb in your jaw and the dentist says you need a root canal or the pain's only going to get worse, what are you going to say? You're not going to say, I've got to go home and think about it. You're not going to say, well, I have to compare your price to other dentists. You're going to say, please, make the pain go away. Give me a solution. If you want to achieve between a 90 and 100% closing ratio on new business, once you've done that good, solid diagnostic, when you go back, what you need to go back with is a solution. And what is a solution? Well, a solution has two parts. Come to the chalkboard with me. The first component of any solution is your audience. But the second component of any solution is what I call the big idea. Because here's what you've learned by now. If you go back just talking about your audience and just talking about your ratings, what marketplace have you put yourself in? Smack dab in the middle of the commodity marketplace. For if you just go back in with a proposed schedule that details your ratings and how many people you reach, I can promise you what the prospect will do. The prospect is going to take a copy of your proposal, fax it off to all of your competitors with an accompanying note saying, can you beat this? And the next day they're going to call you and say that somebody else has beaten your price and you're going to have to do much better. You have to make certain that you have enough audience to accomplish the objective of the prospect, but it's only one component, and we'll deal with that in another volume. But in this lesson, we're going to concentrate on coming up with the big idea. Now, I've got a very important question for you, and it's this. Whose responsibility is it to come up with the big idea? Well, it's a multiple choice question. Is it the prospect's responsibility to come up with the big idea? Is it your responsibility to come up with the big idea? Or is it you and the prospect working together's responsibility to come up with the big idea? There's only one answer, and it's this. It's your responsibility to come up with the big idea. That's the value that you add. For you see, if the prospect had the big idea, you wouldn't even be talking to them, would you? There'd be nothing to discuss. So if you're going to come up with a big idea, how do you go about accomplishing that? Let me share with you one of my favorite advertising stories that I was involved in not long ago. And it concerned a pretty unromantic business type. It was an auto body repair shop. Now, for our viewers in Canada and England and Australia and New Zealand, you know it better as a panel beater. Let me tell you a little bit about this auto body repair shop. A single location doing less than a couple $1 million a year. But the owner wanted to grow and wanted a big idea that could grow his company. Well, how creative can you be in coming up with an idea for an auto body repair shop? Well, here's what we did. We decided to brainstorm. And the starting point for a lot of creativity is asking what makes it difficult in dealing with an auto body repair shop. And as we asked the question around the table, we heard some fascinating responses. One person's hand darted up and they said, I hate being without a car for a week or two that it's going to be in the auto body repair shop. Somebody else said, I hate dealing with all of those insurance forms. And somebody else said, yeah, and it's a real pain arranging to have your car towed to the auto body repair shop. And based on that brainstorming, or what we now call life storming, we came up with a very simple campaign. And the promise was this: if you're involved in an automobile accident, there are 3 things that you should know about our auto body repair shop. The first is this: we'll come and get you wherever you are for free. The second thing that we'll do is give you a free Hertz rental car for as long as we have your car. And the third thing you should know is this: we'll take care of all of the insurance forms. Now that's a pretty big promise. When we went back and we presented it to the auto body repair shop, he said, look, I can't afford to do all these things. And so then what did we do? We negotiated. We didn't negotiate rate. He said, I can't go any place and pick people's cars up and bring them in here. We said, well, how far can you go? And he said, well, I suppose I could go about 300 miles. And so the promise became this: we'll go 300 miles to pick up your car wherever that is. But then, of course, he said, I can't afford a Hertz rental car. And we said, well, we've already cut a deal with the Hertz rental car people at the airport, and here's what they'll do. In exchange for mentioning them 3 times in the commercial, they'll give you free Hertz rental cars, and all you've got to pay is the insurance. So that one was handled. And he finally said, I don't know about handling all that insurance paperwork. And we said, why not? And he said, well, because there's one insurance company that I don't like to work with. And we just looked at him and said, can you get over it? And he said, yes. And we went to air with the campaign. Today, that auto body repair shop has more than 20 locations and is doing in excess of more than $50 million a year. Was it a creative genius that came up with that campaign? No. It was somebody just like you. And I've got a question for you. It's this: are you creative? And you know what I think? I think you are. The dictionary defines creative as being inventive and imaginative. Are you inventive and imaginative? I bet you are. I bet that you're as inventive and as imaginative as you need to be. I remember several years ago, I was conducting a workshop, and it was on making appointments with prospects. And somebody said, I just can't get on the telephone and make an appointment because nobody will give me an appointment. And so I walked up to them, and I took my finger, and I cocked it against their head, and I said, I want you to imagine something. Here's what it is. If I were standing here, and I had a gun next to your head, and I said, call that person and make an appointment, or I'm going to pull the trigger, do you think you'd be able to get the appointment? And predictably they said, yes, of course I could. For you see, I find that we're as inventive or as imaginative as we need to be. And a lot of people in media think of their job as being rather one-dimensional. They go in to see a client or see a prospect, give them the ratings, give them the rates, give them the numbers. And all that creativity stuff, they fob off to somebody else. But if you imagine that you've got a gun to your head and somebody's saying, you come up with a way to sell this $250,000 in stereo gear from HX Electronics, you know what my belief is? My belief is that you'd be able to do it. Now, over the years of having created literally thousands of campaigns all around the world, I've come up with 9 things that represent true big ideas or creative solutions. Come on back to the board with me, and let's take a look at what those things are. The first thing that you have to ask yourself is this: does the big idea fit demographically? It doesn't do very well to have a big idea or a creative idea that doesn't match the age or the lifestyle of the prospect's potential customers. So does it fit the demographic? You have to make certain that it does. Number 2, does it fit the psychographics of the prospect's business? Does it fit the lifestyle of the prospective purchaser? Number 3 is an important one, and it's this: does it belong to you? Is it proprietary to you? Let me take you back to that story about the auto body repair shop. When we went back to see him with the idea, it was obvious. We had done some work. The idea was ours. He wasn't going to steal it. It was not an off-the-shelf solution that we had selected for him. So is the creative idea that you come up with proprietary to you? Does it belong to you? Number 4, and vitally important, is this: will it accomplish the objective of the prospect? If it won't accomplish the immediate objective, then it's of little value or worth. Number 5 over the years I've discovered is this, and I say it this way: does it have legs, or is it just a one-off idea? For you see, if you bring an idea back to a prospect or a client that just deals with solving an immediate problem or opportunity, and the answer is always to have a sale, well, what long-term value are you providing to the client? And for example, the auto body repair shop continues to run the exact same campaign today, several years after it began. He is truly building a franchise in the minds of consumers in many, many markets by using the same campaign. So, does your big idea have legs? Number 6, and this is very important: is it creative? Well, there's a pretty personal one, isn't it? What I think is creative, you might not think is creative. But as you've learned elsewhere in this series, the typical consumer today encounters more than 2,000 advertising impressions every day, between radio, television, newspaper, bus backs, taxi cab signs, end-of-aisle displays in supermarkets. And it's been demonstrated that more than 99% is lost from the consumer's mind within 24 hours. So the first step to creativity is this: does it sound or look different than anybody else's? And that's what's going to lead you to creativity. Is it different than the campaigns being offered by anyone else? For one last time, go back to the auto body repair shop. How many times could you say, bring your car to our auto body repair shop and we'll make it pretty, or we do good work, or we're competitively priced? What would be the advantage of going there? Is it creative? Is it different? The next one is this: does the big idea that you come up with take the prospect out of the commodity marketplace? Again, there's little value If you're offering someone an advertising campaign that just puts them into price competition, which is going to lower their margins, and at some point in time, they're going to have to conclude that all this advertising business, or at least what you're bringing to the table, doesn't have an end result of giving them dollars. So are you helping get them out of the commodity marketplace themselves? Number 8 is best demonstrated by one of my favorite advertising stories ever told. It concerns an outdoor billboard campaign that ran in Southern California for a number of years. And wherever you would travel around Southern California, there were big billboards that proudly announced 3 things to do in Southern California. Number 1, go to the beach. Number 2, go to Disneyland. Number 3, go to Knott's Berry Farm. Well, you see, I've got a suspicion. I bet that when Knott's Berry Farm began running that billboard campaign, they were actually number 7 or 8 on the shopping list of tourists visiting Southern California. What did they want? They wanted to get on the list with Disneyland and with the beach. And the campaign was an overwhelming success. So number 8 is, does the big idea get your prospect on the consumer's shopping list? Number 9, well, it's a little bit more complicated to explain, and it's this. Does it have the aha effect? Now, what is the aha effect? The aha effect is this. When you play it for the client, does the client say to himself or to herself, aha, but of course it makes sense? It's vital that you have the aha effect. Well, you may be asking the question, where in the world do you come up with these big ideas? The big idea for the prospect. Well, I'm going to give you a list of where you can gather the big ideas. Here, closely watch your screen. I'm going to list each of them, and then we'll come back and talk about them. The first place that you can go is the creative department of your particular media facility. Number 2, there it is, friends and family. Number 3, fellow account executives. Number 4, management. Believe it or not, they are good for a lot of things. Number 5, brainstorming, or what I referred to earlier as life storming. Number 6, other business people, other people in business. Number 7, the man on the street. And number 8, you, reaching deep inside yourself. Let's briefly examine each of these 8 resource areas we've mentioned. First, the creative department. Now, I, of course, have no way of knowing what creative resources that you have available to you. But depending on what they are, I would urge you to begin viewing your creative department perhaps in a different fashion than you viewed them before. You see, you're still the individual who has to come up with the basic kernel, with the basic big idea. They can take it, they can make it sound great, they can make it look pretty, but the press of business means that there's no way that they could service all the needs of all the account executives and account managers at your station and get the job done. It absolutely couldn't be done. So use them, but use them to take your big idea and put it into a form that really works. Next, friends and family. Some of my biggest big ideas have come from talking to my mother and father, talking to other people in my family, talking to my 94-year-old grandmother, saying, if you were trying to sell this product, or if you were trying to promote this product, what would turn you on? What would get your bum off the chair and out the door to see the prospect or to visit their store? What would you do? You'll get some splendid ideas from them. Other account executives. Instead of talking to other account executives about how can I go about getting a lower rate for this guy, instead, why don't you say, what ideas do you have on how I could move these sofa beds? Or do you have any ideas on how I might be able to move all this gear at HX Superstores. Next, go to management. Instead of sitting down with your sales manager and saying, please give me a better rate, please give me some bonus spots, instead say, you know, I've got a $25,000 deal coming up from HX Superstores, and I need some ideas on how we can get this sale going. What are yours? So ask management. Next, earlier you heard me do away with the phrase brainstorming. It implies that we all sit around the table and we come up with brilliant ideas out of our brains. I don't think that's necessarily what we do. I prefer the phrase life-storming. Looking back in our life and saying, what would have made us go to a sofa bed warehouse? What would have made us go to this clothing store? What didn't we like about doing business with this particular clothing store or with buying a car or whatever it might happen to be? Next, use your other clients and use other business people. You'll find them to be a font of wonderful ideas. How would they go about selling or promoting this good product or service? And next, you'll see I got rid of man on the street just because it's kind of politically incorrect. Talk to people on the streets. Very often, sitting next to people on public transportation and on airplanes and walking down the street, I'll talk to people in coffee houses and bars and nightclubs, and I'll say, you know, I'm trying to figure a way to get 300 extra people to a car dealership to look at a new model. How would you do that? I mean, everybody wants to be involved in advertising. You'll be amazed at some of the stuff that you'll hear. And finally, and most importantly, is you. Getting rid of any inferiority complexes that you might have about how inventive or how imaginative you are, and just really going for it and saying, all right, what would get me to go to this store? What would get me to begin a customer relationship with this person or with this business? Look deep inside yourself. These are 8 remarkable areas, 8 remarkable resources from which you can derive plenty of big, wonderful ideas. Now, I want to talk to you about a couple of other important tactics. The first is this: don't go back to the prospect with one big idea. Instead, what I want you to do is I want you to create 2 equally attractive big ideas. There's a reason for doing this. For you see, when you do that, what you're presenting the prospect is not a yes or no, but instead an either or. Let me explain that. If you go back with just one big idea, the prospect may very well say, yes, they like it, but they could say they don't like it. On the other hand, if you've got 2 equally big ideas, you're going to be able to ask this question: which of these 2 big ideas do you prefer? Which of these 2 big ideas do you think will do a better job of solving your problem or achieving what you want to achieve? And chances are they're going to say, well, I think 1 is more appropriate than 2, or I think 2 would do a better job than 1. And then here's what you're able to do. You're able to ask them another question. Why do you think that? And you see, as they tell you why they like number 1 or number 2, or why they defend their choice, what they're actually doing is taking possession of it. It's an age-old business tactic. So always remember, you go back with 2 campaigns. Finally, one other important tactic, and that is this: you will not be going in to see the prospect with a proposal. Have you ever thought about what a proposal really is? I know what it is. A proposal is an invitation to not make a decision. How many media proposals are you familiar with? How many have you seen? Probably many, and they all look alike. They've all got a big, beautiful cover, and they're filled with page after page of information. Let me ask you, where's the price? The price is always listed on which page? Right, the last page. Let me ask you this: which is the first page that the prospect looks at? Right, the last page. So why don't you just dispense with all those other pages. And how many times have you probably heard a prospect say, "Wow, nice proposal. You've sure given me a lot to think about here and consider. I'll tell you what, give me a couple of days to review this, and I'll get back to you." Pinocchio, your nose is growing. A proposal is an invitation to not make a decision. A proposal does something else. It also moves you right back into the commodity marketplace. Because if you leave a proposal with a prospect and he or she promises to get back to you, I promise you, you're going to be being shopped against other media alternatives. From this point forward, I'm going to urge that you not use a proposal, but instead something else. It's simply a one-page recommendation or a one-page summary of your solution. Come on along. Let's go back up to the chalkboard and let me show you what I mean. Here's what I want you to go back with. A one-page summary, and here are the things that it's going to list. First of all, it will list the objective. Now, who agreed on the objective? You and the prospect did during the diagnostic. Next, it will list the investment in 1 or 2 lines or a very short paragraph. Now, who agreed on those things? Well, you and the prospect actually negotiated those things during the diagnostic, didn't you? Next, you also did together the quantification. How many he or she needs to sell, how many to move, what their hit rate is, how many prospects they need in. Well, now you've got to do some of your own quantification, and that is it. A brief description showing that you indeed have enough viewers or listeners to achieve the client's objective. Finally, a brief little paragraph allocated to the schedule, and then one short little paragraph describing your creative solution. You'll return to the prospect armed with 2 things. This one-page summary, and then an example of your creative. And let me suggest this to you. Whatever example or sample of your big idea you bring back to the prospect has to be good. The aha effect has to be profound. They have to be able to get their head around it and say, yeah, I think that appendectomy would solve my appendicitis. Yes, I think that this root canal would make the pain go away. The client has to say to themselves, aha, but of course. Well, now you have an interesting choice. Following a successful diagnostic, you can go back with just a schedule and some ratings, but the marketplace that that's going to put you into is the commodity marketplace. Or you can use everything we've discussed together to go back to the client armed with a big idea. For you see, it's your big idea that's going to add value, that's going to make the prospect want to do business with you. And here's what I ask you to keep in mind. I've done it many times. As you're sitting there wrestling with an idea of what can I say, or what can we do, or what can the ad include to promote this furniture store or this insurance company or this product, whatever it might happen to be, imagine yourself with that gun to your head and somebody saying, you better come up with a way to do it or I'm going to pull the trigger. Because here's what I know about you. I know that you're inventive. I know that you're imaginative. If you will give yourself to the process, if you will give yourself to truly getting out of the commodity marketplace, selling spots and dots, and into driving the only thing that will bring true value to the prospect, and that's a big idea. That's a solution. I'll see you on the next volume.